Number 10. Ryan Grantham. In March 2020, an actor who appeared on the popular TV show Riverdale admitted to killing his own mother. 24-year-old Ryan Grantham claimed that he loved his mom. The young man says he only took her life so she wouldn't have to see his crimes. He was apparently planning an assassination attempt on Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada. After approaching the woman, 64-year-old Barbara Waite, he shot her while her back was turned. Reports say she was peacefully playing piano at the time without a clue of what her son was up to. Once his mom was dead, Ryan loaded his car up with guns, bullets, and 12 homemade Molotov cocktails. He then drove to the politician's house and parked outside. Thankfully, though, he couldn't go through with it. But he likely wouldn't have been successful even if he had. The killer instead turned himself into the police, not able to deal with what he did to his mom. In court, the actor was given a life sentence with parole eligibility after 17 years served. Kathleen Kerr, a Supreme Court justice in British Columbia, made an additional ruling after taking into consideration Ryan's genuine remorse for the murder and his mental state during the crime. She lessened the requirements to 14 years, saying his recovery showed promise. But can a killer ever really change? Number 9. Not on my watch. They say mothers have otherworldly instincts when it comes to protecting their children, and that might be true. In January 2023, a mom from Iowa got the scare of her life when two strangers tried to kidnap her son in Des Moines. 43-year-old Michael Ernest Ross and his accomplice, 57-year-old Lori Lynn Potter, were acting suspiciously by pacing back and forth directly in front of an apartment building. The manager of the property, Shay Lindbergh, was worried that something was wrong with the pair, so she opened the front door and asked if they needed help or had a problem. She also happened to have her son with her at the time. As soon as the door was opened, Michael and Lori moved to grab the kid. Luckily, Shay was carrying a gun at the time and threatened to use it if the suspects didn't back off and leave her son alone. A sergeant from the local police department that responded to this call said it was a miracle she had a weapon on her at the perfect moment to protect her child. The criminals were arrested and sent to jail on charges of felony child stealing. Lori also violated her probation and received 2 additional charges for the crime. This story serves as an example of the spirit of mothers everywhere. Michael and Lori shouldn't have tried to take this mom's son. Number 8. Dennis Cho. It's common for kids to get into fights with their parents, but it usually stops happening after they've grown up. Sadly, a 20-year-old man from New York named Dennis Cho never learned how to forgive and forget. And he took out his anger on his 60-year-old mother, Suk-Hyun Cho, after they had an argument. The incident happened recently in February 2023. In the home they shared, Dennis stabbed and killed his mother. One of the family's neighbors was shocked by the brutal crime. He told CBS 2 that the neighborhood was very close, and he never would have thought something like this could happen there. He claimed that the Cho family was usually pretty quiet and polite, which made the crime all the more surprising. Not a lot of information has been released yet on this case, but police have revealed a few details. Apparently, officers have been called to the home multiple times in the past for domestic disputes. Dennis and his mother often argued, but it had never escalated to this point before. The killer's father also supposedly had minor injuries on his head, neck, and hand. It's possible that he tried fighting his son off, but was unsuccessful. We aren't sure what prompted the fight, but unfortunately, we know how it ended. Dennis has since been charged with murder, and he'll hopefully be brought to justice soon enough. Number 7. Levi Isaac Davis. A lot of people believe that animals are the best judges of character. If a dog, cat, or other pet likes you, it can be seen as a good sign. With this in mind, you'd think that the director of a humane society would be loved by everyone. But sadly, that isn't always the case. Despite running the West Valley Humane Society, Carly Cantrell had one person who despised her: her 26-year-old son, Levi Isaac Davis. Carly was discovered dead at her home in Middleton in October 2022, and police instantly suspected Levi. They found the young man in the nearby city of Nampa. Inside his car, bloody clothes were discovered, and the suspect had multiple injuries. He was burnt on his bicep, had a large scratch on his hand, and also had a deep laceration on his thigh. When officers interrogated him, Levi feigned interest, even pretending to fall asleep at one point during questioning. He also seemed unfazed when told of details of his mother's death. She was stabbed several times in both the neck region and abdomen. The crime was reported when another family member found Carly laying in a bloody room and dialed 911. First-degree murder charges were brought against her son after he committed the ultimate betrayal. There's no coming back from killing your mother. Levi will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. The prosecutor against him said during a court hearing that, "This is one of the most horrific fact patterns I've had to read in my time in this role. This case will likely haunt investigators for years to come." Number 6. Matthew Hawks. A 31-year-old man was arrested in 2018 after a witness saw him shoot both his parents. Mary Ellen Kavanaugh heard a loud commotion coming from her next-door neighbor's house around 8:40 p.m. one night. She decided to see what was going on, but as she was walking up to their door, she saw something disturbing. Matthew Hawks had a gun raised and pointed at his 77-year-old father, Henry, and his 62-year-old mom, Donna. And Mary watched as Matthew pulled the trigger. She immediately ran to hide and yelled at her roommate to call the police. As she was shouting, Matthew came out from the crime scene and stormed past Mary without uttering as much as a single word. Police think that he and his family got into an intense verbal argument that went too far. Luckily, Donna survived the incident and was able to speak to officers while being treated at a Delaware hospital. Unfortunately, Henry passed away from his injuries, making his son a certified killer. After a manhunt that lasted several hours, Matthew was finally located and taken into custody. He was charged with both murder and aggravated assault for what he did. The court sentenced him to 25 to 70 years behind bars. While Mary didn't know the Hawks family that well, she claimed that they were good people. They'd lived next door to each other for years, and she had sometimes heard the parents fighting with their son. She had no idea it could get this bad. No one could have. What would you do if you accidentally witnessed a murder and the killer made eye contact with you before you fled the scene? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you liked today's video so far, be sure to subscribe. Number 5. Sibling rivalry. Kids will be kids is usually what people will say when children get into fights. For the most part, sibling arguments don't go further than 1 or 2 hits. A mother was horrified though after her 13-year-old son and 14-year-old daughter were at each other's throats. Their fight ended in 42-year-old Rupiah Begum's son stabbing his older sister with a steak knife. He didn't just hit her once either. The boy stabbed the girl over and over again in a fit of blind rage. Rupiah was at work during the attack, but at around 7 p.m. that night in March 2023, she had to rush back to her Jamaica home in the middle of her shift at McDonald's. She left work after receiving a call that detailed what her son had done. Sadly, the woman's husband also wasn't home at the time since he was overseas on a business trip in Bangladesh. When Rupiah spoke with her son, he said that he didn't know why he did it. He was just angry. The teenage girl was sent to the hospital in critical condition. After the boy stabbed her, he apparently called the police and told them someone else had broken into the home and assaulted the victim. However, when authorities arrived, she was able to weakly tell officers that her brother was responsible. A neighbor mentioned to news outlets that the boy had autism. They said they often heard him screaming, but besides that, the family seemed very nice. Rupiah says her children usually play together just fine, and this was a one-time incident. But how could she be sure of that? We'll have to wait and see how this case plays out in the coming months. Number 4. Kevin Davis. Our next story is deeply disturbing, so fair warning to anyone with a weak stomach. On March 27, 2014, a 17-year-old boy named Kevin Davis confided in his mother, 50-year-old Kimberly Hill, that he no longer had a will to live. This obviously upset the Texas mom, but she had experience dealing with these kind of situations thanks to her job in hospice care. Kevin asked for her permission to take his own life and was likely disappointed when she tried talking him out of it. During their conversation, the teenager's anger grew to a boiling point until finally he snapped. He grabbed a wire from one of his video game consoles and wrapped it around Kimberly's throat. With as much force as he could muster, he pulled as hard as he could to cut off her air supply. Afterward, he smashed her head about 20 times with a hammer. It was truly a brutal scene that would leave even the toughest detective sick. Once he succeeded in killing his mom, Kevin stripped off the victim's clothing and sexually violated her remains. Before leaving the crime scene, the disgusting killer wrote down a couple messages for police. He apologized for the mess of blood he left everywhere and told law enforcement to chase him down. The boy then grabbed some of his stuff and biked along some nearby train tracks. At some point along the way though, he must have changed his mind about running from the authorities. Kevin ended up knocking on a random house's door and asked to use their phone. Then he turned himself in. When questioned by investigators, he said that he really did love his mom, but he also didn't regret anything he'd done. They asked if he thought Kimberly deserved what he did to her, and he claimed she didn't. He was just a terrible, disgusting person. That we can all agree on. For what he did, he was sentenced to life in prison. Number 3. DARREN POUNCEY. At the start of 2023, a man from Martin County, Florida was accused of killing his 58-year-old mother, Christina Ruth Diorio. A neighbor received a message from Christina saying that she needed some help. Sadly though, they didn't see her text until it was already too late. When they went to her home to check on her, they found Christina dead, wrapped up in a blanket. The victim's son, 34-year-old DARREN POUNCEY, was also at the scene. His hands were covered in blood, and he seemed highly distressed. When the neighbor found him, he apparently asked for a gun. Obviously, they didn't give him one, and instead called the police. DARREN was quickly arrested, but when officers tried to talk with him, he just raised his middle finger at them. He was very uncooperative and didn't give investigators much to go off of. When they searched his mother's home, they found a notebook. It seemed like it belonged to the killer because inside it read, "So I gave in to the devil tonight." This belief might explain the man's actions. He's still in custody at the moment and has yet to be sentenced for the murder. Number 2. Travis GRAFE. Knott's Berry Farm in Florida is world famous for their baked goods, produce, and ice cream. In February 2023, the owner of the farm, 66-year-old Rachel Knott's GRAFE, was killed. Police officers have arrested the woman's son, 40-year-old Travis GRAFE, for her murder. He apparently went to his parents' home that day and demanded that they give him money. When they refused to give him anything, Travis grew angry and started brutally beating his mom. He used a flashlight for the attack, and once he finished with Rachel, he turned toward his dad, Herbert. The victims were taken to the Jackson Memorial Hospital for treatment. While the father made a full recovery, the Knott's Berry Farm owner wasn't as lucky, and she passed away at the medical facility. After committing the murder, Travis escaped the crime scene on a golf cart. He went to one of his parents' neighbors' doorsteps and told them what he'd done. The neighbor then called police, who came and arrested the killer. With a troubling history, investigators saw that Travis received a traumatic brain injury about 2 decades ago. Since then, he's had issues with following the law. As a result of his violent actions, he's been charged with murder, battery, and attempted robbery. Even with a brain injury, Travis will have to face the consequences for what he's done. Number 1. Julian McElhaney. In April 2022, a man from Fresno, California was arrested for fatally shooting his parents. 23-year-old Julian McElhaney is said to have gotten into a verbal disagreement with his mom, 64-year-old Sylvia, and his dad, 55-year-old William. After his arrest, police interrogated the suspect, and Julian told them his reasons for taking revenge on the people who raised him. He said that his father had sexually abused him growing up, and that his mother also subjected him to abuse. They allegedly forced him to work and tried to poison him at one point too. The man said that he had no plan to kill anyone, he just wanted to confront his parents. But things didn't go exactly according to plan. His defense team has claimed that Julian is suffering from severe mental illness. During the preliminary hearings before the official court date, the killer sat completely still, showing almost zero emotions. Julian's next trial is set for April 2023, at which point he'll more than likely be found guilty. What's the worst fight you've ever had with your parents? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Bad Badger.